The Courier from Fallout New Vegas is one of the most influential characters in the entire Wasteland. They are the one who cheats death, plants themselves dab smack in the middle of a tumultuous and volatile conflict, and takes the steps that will alter the Mojave Wasteland forever. But what if the Courier was beyond saving? What if Doc Mitchell couldn't put the pieces back together? What if the Courier died? Let's talk about it. This is what would happen if the Courier died. To start, let's address the person who is the most surprised regarding your unbelievable resurrection, Benny. Killing the Courier and taking the Platinum Chip was part of Benny's grand plan of usurping House and taking control of the New Vegas Strip for himself. If the Courier had died in New Vegas's opening scene, Benny's plot to seize New Vegas would play out differently from what we see. Without Courier intervention, his plan to claim Mr. House's empire for himself would probably go much smoother. Benny's big plan hinges on one thing: using the Platinum Chip to gain control of House's upgraded securitron army and then forcefully pushing him out of power. Without the Courier heading to the tops and confronting him, Benny would be able to begin his coup relatively unchallenged, but taking over New Vegas isn't as easy as flipping a switch. In the game's timeline, Benny never really gets too far with his plan because the Courier ends up confronting him at the tops. However, without the Courier to hunt him down, Benny would be able to proceed with this plan. The first obstacle would be getting to Fortification Hill and activating the Securitron army in the Lucky 38 vault. We see in-game that if the Courier lets Benny go at the tops, he winds up getting captured by the Legion, so he wouldn't be able to go himself. His best bet would be to hire the Great Khans again, as they already have some rapport with the Legion. Frame it as the Great Khans are sending an ambassador with a gift to thank the Legion for saving them from the NCR's cruelty, or something along those lines. Stroke Kaisar's ego, and then once you're inside the fort, have them infiltrate the Securitron vault and take control of the army. It would be tough to do for sure, but necessary for Benny's plan to work. Step 1 done. Benny now has access to an unprecedented level of firepower, enough to challenge even the NCR and Kaisar's Legion. But here's where his plan meets his biggest obstacle: Mr. House. House is brilliant, strategic, and decades ahead of Benny in experience, literally. If he suspects Benny is attempting to access the Platinum Chip, he'd quickly take precautions to protect his control systems, perhaps reprogramming or locking down key infrastructure. And conversations with House reveal that he did suspect Benny's treachery. Victor the Securitron was sending updates to House from Goodsprings. House reveals that Victor reported the Courier's assassination at the hands of Benny to him. With this knowledge, it's likely that House would have had his own plan to stop Benny. So while Benny might think that the chip is his golden ticket, it's likely that Mr. House would be ready to fight back. Now, even if Benny manages to activate and take over the Securitrons, taking the Strip would still be a challenge. The other casino families, the Omertas and White Glove Society, are loyal to House not because they love him, but because he keeps the Strip profitable for them. If Benny removes House, he's left with the hard job of convincing these families that he can run New Vegas just as effectively. And if Benny and the chairman are securing more power for themselves, what's stopping the other two families from wanting more power as well? It's likely that they wouldn't easily defect to Benny's cause. With his suave charm, Benny might win over some people initially, but his ambition lacks the steady hand that Mr. House provides. Mr. House rules with a cold calculation, keeping order and stability, ensuring that the Strip is a beacon of pre-war glamour amidst the wasteland. Benny, by contrast, craves power, but may lack the vision to use it wisely. It's likely that he would struggle to maintain the same level of control that House exercises effortlessly, and eventually, cracks would begin to show. But let's keep this hypothetical going. Let's say Benny does succeed in pushing House out of the picture, and even manages to retain the support of the other two families. His New Vegas coup succeeds. But while Mr. House understood the delicate balance of the Mojave's politics, Benny would likely quickly be out of his element. Sure, he has leadership experience with the chairman, but leading a former Wasteland tribe can only take you so far. It was House's vision of New Vegas that saved and repurposed Benny's Mojave boot riders into the chairman, what we now know them as. Benny would be going from managing one tribe where outsider interactions were dealt with by House, to having to manage several families and negotiate his own outside relations. He would be out of his element. On top of that, Kaiser's Legion and the NCR are watching New Vegas closely, each eager to claim it for their own. By the start of the game, the Legion's brutality and the NCR's bureaucracy are already creeping closer to the Strip, and without House's careful manipulation to keep them at bay, they'd see Benny's coup as a perfect opportunity to sweep in. While the Legion may not be able to cross the Colorado River without invoking a response from the NCR, you know that the NCR is already licking its lips, seeing the infighting between Benny, House, and the Strip. It would be a prime opportunity to take control of what is essentially the capital of the Mojave. If the NCR senses Benny's hold on the Strip is weak, they might exploit it by increasing their military presence in the region, perhaps even launching a full-scale takeover. Meanwhile, Kaiser's Legion, known for its ruthless efficiency, might see Benny as an amateurish upstart and easy target. Kaiser might ramp up his operations, preparing to attack the Hoover Dam sooner to get to the Strip. For both the Legion and the NCR, Benny's takeover would look less like a regime change and more like a weakening of the Strip's defenses, a signal that New Vegas might just be ripe for the taking. Ultimately, I think Benny would lead New Vegas into a period of instability, leaving it vulnerable to hostile forces. If Benny does succeed, New Vegas could lose its independence altogether, becoming a pawn in the NCR Legion conflict. And if House manages to survive Benny's coup attempt, it's likely he'd retaliate ruthlessly, either eliminating Benny outright or relegating him to some other miserable fate. House's control would eventually be restored, but the Strip's reputation, and perhaps its economy, would take a serious hit. Without the Courier, Benny's plan might appear promising, but the reality is that I think he's playing a game he doesn't fully understand. Mr. House is the true architect of New Vegas, someone with the knowledge, resources, and determination to maintain control in a world that's constantly threatening to fall apart. Benny's takeover, without the Courier's interference, might buy him a fleeting moment of power, but in the Mojave, fleeting moments rarely lead to lasting empires. And then we have the second part of the game, the build-up to the second battle of the Hoover Dam. Without Courier intervention, the NCR and Kaiser's Legion would prepare for the coming showdown at Hoover Dam with expert strategy and subterfuge, each side exploiting every opportunity to weaken the other before the final clash. While the NCR controls the dam and has the advantage of established bases throughout the Mojave, the Legion's guerrilla warfare, psychological tactics, and sabotage keep NCR forces constantly on edge. Both factions would spend months leading up to the battle, reinforcing, gathering intelligence, and attempting to sway smaller factions to their cause. The Legion's preparations begins with psychological warfare, conducted through small, brutal raids on NCR camps and settlements around the Mojave. We've already seen them perform attacks on Nelson, Nipton, and during the game, Ranger Station Charlie. It's likely that the Legion would continue these attacks. Without the Courier solving the NCR's woes and relieving soldiers to bolster forward positions, it's likely that other NCR camps like Forlorn Hope would fall. These attacks serve two purposes: weakening NCR morale and spread the message that the Legion is everywhere. that nowhere in the Mojave is safe. Legion scouts would continue monitoring NCR patrol routes, harassing and killing NCR soldiers whenever possible. They know they can't match NCR's firepower head-on, so they resort to a psychological war of attrition, forcing NCR soldiers to stay constantly vigilant and sapping their stamina long before they reach Hoover Dam. NCR forces stationed at remote outposts and towns will feel isolated, and rumors of Legion brutality would spread, ruining NCR morale. One of the Legion's best assets in this time before the battle is its spy network, with the most crucial operative stationed at Camp McCarran. The Legion spy, Curtis, has been feeding critical intelligence on NCR movements, supply shipments, and troop morale to the Legion. This intel gives Caesar's forces an edge, allowing them to orchestrate ambushes and surprise attacks on NCR convoys, further disrupting the NCR supply lines and morale. NCR commanders suspect there's a leak, but struggle to pinpoint its source, leaving them vulnerable to more attacks. In the game, it's up to the Courier to decide how to handle this spy situation. They can help Curtis on behalf of the NCR, securing his undercover identity, while also framing a young NCR private for the data leaks and eventual monorail bomb plot. Or they can discover Curtis's plans and provide evidence to the command at Camp McCarran, ultimately destroying years of work the Legion had done to get the spy into such a position. Without Courier interference, I do believe that the Legion's full plan would come into fruition. Sure, while the NCR suspects that there's a spy amidst their ranks, this has been a plan that the Legion's greatest minds have spent much time on. Surely it would still succeed. It's not a matter of if the Legion will succeed with their monorail plot, it's really a matter of when. The Courier speeds this process up by allowing Curtis to remain free of suspicion, while the Courier puts the plan into motion. The NCR really is on the back foot during the entire NCR Legion conflict before the damn battle. Now, it may seem like the Legion gets their way a lot of the time if there was no Courier. And that's entirely true. That's how it is when you're the faction that's on the offensive, fighting against a faction that's spread out too thin. You're gonna end up winning more often than not. In Legion playthroughs, the Courier isn't really playing the savior role, rather they're acting as an accelerant for the Legion's plans. The Legion would conduct their plans as intended, with or without the Courier, but their presence merely ensures that they succeed in a timely manner. With both the NCR and Legion entrenched in this intense struggle for domination, it's no surprise that their influence reaches far beyond their own forces. Other factions in the Mojave can't afford to ignore the rising tensions, and many find themselves forced to pick a side, or at the very least, navigate the chaos as best they can. Without the Courier to act as a bridge between rival factions, the Mojave's minor powers, like the Boomers, Great Khans, and Brotherhood of Steel, face uncertain and often grim futures. Each group has ambitions and grievances that place them on the fringes of the NCR Legion conflict. But without a neutral mediator to negotiate alliances, secure resources, or mitigate rivalries, their isolation or stubborn pride limits their potential. The Mojave becomes an even harsher place for those not directly involved in the struggle for the Hoover Dam, and each faction must rely on its own strength, for better or for worse. The Boomers, tucked safely away at Nellis Air Force Base, would likely continue their isolated lifestyle, surrounded by anti-aircraft artillery that keep out all but the most daring trespassers. While expansion or cooperation would benefit the Boomers immensely, without a reliable outside agent like the Courier to approach them diplomatically, they're more likely to double down on their isolation. Now, this isolation might work in the Boomers' favor for a time, as they remain safe, undisturbed, and secure. However, without alliances, they aren't able to capitalize on their power to influence the Mojave. the boomers might grow increasingly frustrated, aware that they hold immense firepower, but have no one to wield it against or to protect. They continue their rigid routines, testing and maintaining their artillery, but their ambitions become stale, a dream held by a people unwilling to face the reality outside of their walls. If the NCR or Legion eventually claim the Hoover Dam, it's likely that one of these factions will seek out to destroy the boomers and take their firepower for themselves, similar to the boomers' endings in the game. The Great Khans, scarred by years of conflict with the NCR, are poised at a crossroads that requires careful negotiation and a way out of a declining situation. With the Courier's help in New Vegas, the Khans had a chance to rebuild or even relocate, possibly finding a place of respect or power. But without that guidance, the Khans are stranded, stuck between their long-standing resentment of the NCR and their limited resources. Papa Khan, their leader, sees his people as the remnants of a proud legacy, but he lacks the means to achieve lasting stability. The Khan's choices are limited, and without someone to advocate for a new path, they're left with only one real option: joining up with Caesar's Legion. But as we see in the game, this alliance is proven to be uneasy at best. The Khans are fierce, independent, and unwilling to bend to anyone's rule, which makes them incompatible with Caesar's vision of absolute loyalty, uniformity, and obedience. The Legion would likely use the Khans as expendable shock troops, promising them land or respect, while viewing them merely as tools to weaken the NCR. In the event of a Legion victory at the Hoover Dam, the Great Khans would likely face a betrayal, similar to the game's endings. Caesar's Legion would see no need for an independent warrior tribe, and once their usefulness wanes, they would face forced assimilation or outright extermination. Ultimately, without the Courier's intervention, the Khans face a dark fate, potentially erased from the Mojave's future, as their culture is either wiped out or absorbed under a regime that values only dominance. And the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel, holed up in Hidden Valley, faces a harsh reality without the Courier's support. Already weakened from years of open conflict with the NCR, they cling to their bunker and to a rigid doctrine of protecting technology at any cost. The NCR views the Brotherhood as dangerous tech hoarders, unwilling to share or negotiate, and is prepared to eliminate them outright if they become a significant threat. The Brotherhood, true to form, refuses any compromise and instead remains in a state of watchful hostility, determined to preserve their principles even as their numbers dwindle. Without an ally to broker a truce or soften their stance, the Brotherhood of Steel becomes more of a nuisance to the NCR than a legitimate threat. They will continue their covert patrols, occasionally gathering supplies or scavenging advanced tech, but these actions do little to grant them any significant power. Instead, they will likely invite increased NCR pressure. Eventually, the Brotherhood may attempt a Hail Mary, attacking Helios 1 while the brunt of the NCR's forces are at the Hoover Dam. And while this raid would likely succeed due to overwhelming Brotherhood power against an undermanned objective, it would only be temporary. If the NCR succeeds at the Hoover Dam, they'll likely bring the full force of their resources down on Hidden Valley and Helios 1 in order to eliminate the Brotherhood once and for all. On the other hand, Caesar's Legion, should they win the dam, would view the Brotherhood with equal disdain. The Legion's anti-tech philosophy is entirely at odds with the Brotherhood's, leading to their extermination as well. There's no real winning here. In a Mojave without the Courier, each minor faction is left to fend for itself, navigating a wasteland that grows more brutal as the NCR and Legion grind each other down. The boomers remain untouched but stagnant, powerful yet isolated. The Great Khans cling to their warrior code, only to find themselves pawns in a game where there's no reward for their pride. And the Brotherhood of Steel, unwilling to yield or adapt, faces extinction. Without the Courier, these minor factions find themselves caught up in the wake of a war that offers them little benefit, but plenty of danger. Their paths might have held promise at some point, but without an agent or ambassador to unite them or offer alternatives, they remain splintered, divided, and ultimately at the mercy of whichever power prevails. The Mojave would be left a colder, harsher place. Its varied groups are either forgotten or consumed by the endless struggle for dominance. And finally, we come to the ultimate fate of the Mojave, the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam. With no Courier to tip the scales, the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam unfolds in a far more brutal, uncertain manner, as the NCR and Caesar's Legion collide in an unyielding clash. Each side commits to the fight with everything it has, hoping their victory results in securing the Mojave. But without the unstoppable agent that is the Courier, each faction's plans are fraught with missteps, and the bloody outcome reshapes the Mojave in ways that neither side could fully predict. By the time the Legion launches its assault on the Hoover Dam, Caesar's strength, surprisingly, has begun to falter. His brain tumor, long kept hidden and untreated, finally catches up with him, and as the Legion masses for war, their great leader lies dead in his tent. With Caesar gone, it's likely that the Legion's unity begins to fracture. Leonius, his brutal and tactically skilled legate, steps up to take command, carrying out Caesar's vision with a double focus on force and ruthlessness. Yet, even with Leonius at the helm, cracks in the Legion's foundations begin to show. Leonius lacks Caesar's grand ideological pull and charisma. While his men fear him, they do not revere him as they did Caesar. Whispers of dissent run through the ranks as the legionnaires question their future under a leader known more for his savage battlefield tactics rather than his unique vision for the future. Still, Leonius and the Legion press on, determined to honor Caesar's dream of a Legion-dominated Mojave. The NCR, while formidable on paper, is hampered by its bureaucracy and overextended forces. General Oliver, set in his conventional military ways, refuses to consider alternative strategies, opting instead to dig in and fight the Legion head-on at the dam. The NCR soldiers understand that they're defending more than a structure. They're defending the NCR's foothold in the Mojave. However, morale is low, and supplies are scarce. They've fought too many battles, and without the Courier's influence, they lack the strategic advantages that could have turned the tide. As tensions reach an all-time high, the Legion initiates its assault, and the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam begins. With its overwhelming force, the Legion quickly gains a foothold. Leonius's tactics and even himself ensure that the Legion forces only move forward. Wave after wave of legionaries are likely thrown at the NCR's defenses. For the Legion, it's merely a numbers game. The NCR frontline and snipers find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of targets. The NCR begins to wonder if the Republic's expansion efforts are worth the bloodshed. NCR Command, desperate for a quick resolution, find themselves increasingly outmatched by the Legion's blitzkrieg attack. And it only makes sense. While the NCR spent the time between the two Hoover Dam conflicts spread much too thin, trying to exert control over the entire Mojave Desert, the Legion was able to concentrate their guerrilla efforts, harassing and targeting key NCR locations and supply routes. This focused effort would pay off at the Second Battle of the Hoover Dam. With a seemingly endless amount of Legion forces advancing, the odds of victory look grim for the Republic. But just when the NCR is on the verge of collapse, As if it were some classic war movie, laser bolts fly across the battlefield as the mechanical chorus of 100 one-wheeled robots roll into the fray. Whoever is in charge of the strip at the time, House, Benny, Yes Man, whoever, comes in at the last minute, turning the tide of the battle. Who needs the courier when you've got a robot army, you know? Mr. House's securitron army, fully upgraded and ready for combat, sweeps into action. House has always seen the Hoover Dam as a key to his long-term plans, and with neither the NCR nor the Legion fit to control it or the Mojave, he finally intervenes. Securitrons roll across the battlefield cold and efficient, their high-tech weaponry cutting through Legion forces. In the wake of this intervention, the NCR manages to rally. Soldiers regroup behind the Securitron lines, relieved to have a powerful ally, albeit an unexpected one. The Legion, by contrast, is likely thrown into disarray. Lanius fights with a grim determination, refusing to concede, but even he can't hold out against a fully automated army. Without Kaisar, the Legion's momentum falters, and they're forced to retreat, leaving the dam in NCR and Securitron hands. Or claws. Hands and claws. With the dust settled and the Legion effectively defeated, the NCR's victory would come at a cost. It is clear that they were saved by Vegas's intervention, not by their own strength. The timing of House's arrival would likely be entirely planned. House needed to wait for a good portion of the NCR forces to fall before coming in to play hero. With the NCR culled and the Legion annihilated, House would be able to secure a better and safer future for his own empire instead. Mr. House, or his Securitrons acting on his behalf rather, propose a new agreement, the New Vegas Treaty 2.0. It would be similar to the current agreement between the NCR and House signed prior to the start of the game, but with more concessions for the Strip and Mr. House. This new pact would likely forever recognize Vegas as an independent city-state, separate from NCR control, but obviously open to NCR citizens to visit, gamble, and spend money, of course. Instead of only receiving 5% of the Hoover Dam's power output like in the current agreement, House and the Strip would get a higher cut, say 25%. And any excess power could be sold back to the NCR for a profit. This would ensure House's vision of making New Vegas the entertainment heart of the West, an economic powerhouse that thrives on tourism rather than conquest. The NCR, bruised and exhausted from the war, would likely reluctantly agree to the terms. General Oliver would see the benefit in a truce. They can claim victory at the Hoover Dam without the headache of trying to govern New Vegas directly. NCR officials begin to speak of stability and progress in the Mojave, hoping to shift the focus away from their near defeat. They know that the Mojave will never fully be under their control, but a steady stream of NCR citizens, drawn by the allure of New Vegas, will ensure that the Republic has some control or pressure in the region. The Legion's retreat doesn't mark the end of their presence in the Mojave, but without Kaisar, they lose the ideological drive that once held them together. Lanius, if he survived, returns to Arizona, his once spotless reputation tarnished by a lone defeat. The Legion's influence in the Mojave wanes. Raiders and small factions seize Legion outposts, and the once feared warriors face a future of internal struggle and possible fragmentation. Under House's watchful and controlling gaze, New Vegas stands as a fortress of wealth and power in the Mojave, but it's no paradise. While tourists from the NCR flock to the Strip, drawn in by the casinos and neon lights, the locals find themselves under a strict, unwavering regime. House's robotic enforcers patrol the streets, maintaining order without tolerance for dissent. Those who seek to resist his rule quickly discover that the glitz of New Vegas comes with an iron grip, making it clear that House's vision leaves little room for personal freedom or true prosperity among the Mojave's citizens. The NCR, meanwhile, settles for a fragile victory. They retain control of the Hoover Dam and keep the Legion at bay, but their influence in the region remains tenuous, shadowed by House's presence. This new status quo, a New Vegas controlled by a single autocrat, the NCR clinging to its holdings, and the Legion's influence slowly fading, ensures the Mojave remains as a land caught between visions, where stability will always be in question. To close things off for today, in a Mojave without the Courier, the Wasteland settles into an uneasy quiet. Power is shifted and claimed, but never fully secured. Unbeknownst to anyone, an unmarked grave in Goodsprings is home to the nameless Courier that could have changed everything. The Mojave endures, but the dreams of its would-be rulers remain just out of reach, leaving the future uncertain and its battles far from over. That's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Join the Discord. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
And so the Courier died in the cemetery outside Goodsprings, and the Mojave Wasteland never changed.